has their own mannequin. Each student has their own mannequin and their own sort of working desk and setup, and their own desktop Mac computer to work from as well. And this is included as part of the fees within the course. We also strive to create a real bank of fabrications within the department. So we have a lot of fabrics that we would get from, for example, this year we had fabrics from Victoria Beckham, or designers that might have old fabrications or sort of dead stock, etc. And we kind of create this kind of archive of fabrics that our students have access to and can use during their time with us as well. In terms of the fashion communication course, you can absolutely use sewing machines and be sort of taught technically as well. It's not a part of the first year of that course, but a lot of the students on that course want to have an understanding of how garments are created and how to make their own clothes in terms of styling, etc. So a lot of the students do choose to actually follow some of the basic technical skills that our first year fashion students would have, even though they're studying fashion branding and creative communication. And I think that's a fantastic idea. I think, as I've said, the more that you can kind of broaden your skill set and your ability to create, the better. So we are really happy to allow our students access to all areas of the department and to really help them kind of hone their skills, even if that's not technically part of their taught course. How I maintain my passion for fashion and creation, I just really love what I do. I enjoy creativity and having my own business, but I also equally enjoy education. For me, I've always been associated with education. So over the last 20 years, I've taught in a lot of different institutions across the UK. So I've kind of experienced a lot of different students. I've also mentored a lot of new designers. And I was a global ambassador for Graduate Fashion Week, which really meant sort of promoting UK talent around the world. And really, I'm a sort of strong advocate for a UK education and for the work that our students create. I think it's a real privilege to work in education and to watch a creative journey from the first year to the third year of the course. It's incredibly exciting. There's nothing to me that's as exciting as seeing kind of raw talent forming in first year and how a student can kind of hone and finesse that during their time with us. It's incredibly exciting. I'm often quite jealous because I wish it was me doing that again. But that also feeds my own passion for my own work and my own creativity. So I just love creating and making and mark making, drawing, anything within that sphere. And having that interaction with new designers that are kind of starting out in the field keeps me kind of fresh and excited as well. I am always very busy and everyone does get tired, yes, but I think, again, having that kind of passion for what I do and kind of what I've built up over the last few years, it's how I live. It's how my kind of world is structured. You know, my house is very colourful. It's kind of very reflective of how I work. To me, my kind of life and work are just very, very interconnected, and just I'm naturally drawn to creativity and enjoy that in any form. My thoughts on the positives and setbacks of transferring from a different industry to fashion. I think it is a huge positive. I don't really see that as a negative in any way, because I think having a different suite of skills, when I graduated from my degree, I worked in industry and I worked in a variety of different jobs for a few years before I went back to study my master's. So I had about 5 years. I worked, for example, for a very famous antique jeweler. I ran a gallery. I did various other things that really helped me when it came to finishing my MA and then moving into work and also starting my own business. So I think in life, really anything that gives you different insight into different people, into different ways of working, into different ways of business is an incredibly positive thing. So we have students that have not touched fashion before. We have quite a lot of students that come from architecture actually into fashion, but also from graphics. I think it's absolutely no barrier. I think it gives you an interesting, different perspective on the fashion industry, which might actually be a bit more refreshing in a way than somebody who's studied fashion from the whole journey through creativity. Not being good at sewing does not matter at all, and it is never too late to start learning. So we assume when our students come to us on the first day of first year, even if they have been sewing for 10 years, we basically start everybody from exactly the same point and assume that nobody has sewn before. So we like to teach what we consider to be the absolutely strongest and best way to learn those basic skills. So every institution will have a slightly different approach to what they consider to be important and to how they teach you to pattern, cut and sew and technically make. And we like to kind of, as I said, work from the basis that everybody's starting from the same point. Everyone has a different rate of learning when it comes to the technical side of things. But I think it's incredibly important to not feel that is a drawback. You know, everybody, some people are, I'm not actually naturally that technical. It's not the bit of the process I enjoy the most, but that shouldn't be a compromise to what you create as a creative. And we really work a lot with our students when it comes, for example, to their final collections. They have a lot of one-to-one sewing time with the machinist. So even if sewing isn't necessarily their forte, it doesn't stop them in creating incredible garments, which are really well finessed and considered. And they have a huge amount of one-to-one pattern cutting time in the final year as well, which really allows them to create very valid and creative shapes. It doesn't create any disadvantages, and we will kind of provide additional support if that is not an area where a student feels very confident. In terms of the fashion department and our Vietnamese students, I think we've had 3, and we've had 1 each year in the last 3 years. And Chi Chi was the first one of them that we had 3 years ago, and she actually studied an MA in the UK, so she was working in that last time I saw her. And then she was moving, I think she wanted to move into PR following that. And we had Leela as well, who she then went on to work. I think she was working within the UK for a designer brand there and studying production. And then we had one that, I've been at CSVPA for 5 years, so we had one student that predated me that was working for quite a big high street company within the UK as well. But like I said, CSVPA is an incredibly international institution. So we have a very big melting pot of students and staff from different nationalities, diverse areas of the world. It's a really exciting place to study from my point of view. From that kind of mix that you get, it creates a really dynamic and exciting kind of fusion of nationalities to kind of study and create under. Fashion design, does it mean dressing well? I think that is really in the eye of the individual. Everyone has a different perception of what dressing well means, and what I perceive to be dressing well and what you perceive to be dressing well are probably quite different things. And the answer is no. Sometimes the greatest designers can look the most inconspicuous and they'll be the quietest one in the room that you would not notice. So sort of being flamboyant or kind of extrovert in terms of your dress, or, you know, dressing in a very high-end fashion, it doesn't necessarily translate into skills. In terms of styling, there's a sort of different approach, but in terms of actual fashion design, I think you can never really tell who is going to be the big talent. And you should also never really judge a book by its cover. So that's what's kind of exciting, is to see the students that we get. Some of them have very distinctive identities that are kind of very clear and belong to certain kind of cultural tribes when they arrive with us, but to see how that kind of evolves is quite exciting as well during their time with us. My own brand is, my own brand, Holly Fulton. The style in my brand is really about kind of graphic contemporary luxury. So the USP of what I do as a designer is really through the textiles. So I would hand draw all of the print and embellishments that we create, and they really became the kind of signature style of my brand. So we're kind of known for having this kind of very colourful, very graphic identity that is easily transferable to both clothing, to textiles, accessories, and also to other products as well. And we do work collaboratively for a lot of projects. So we have a studio called Studio Fulton that sits alongside our own clothing. And we do a lot of collaborations within that, as I said, that are not necessarily clothing based. And for me, that's what is exciting as a designer. I love kind of being challenged to work. It's almost more exciting to me if someone says, here's a car, can you put a pattern on this? And if they say, can you design a jumper? Because I want to sort of work in things that I haven't worked in before. I mean, even though I'm working in education, for me, I will never stop learning. A creative person is never finished, kind of continuing that journey and learning new skills and new ways of working. You know, that's kind of I guess it harks back to that earlier question. That's my kind of passion for it, is that I still feel there's so much to experiment with, there's so much still to try, and so much that I would still like to create and work with that's still to come. That's why kind of working with students and new designers and having that kind of immersion into those first stages of development and brands being formed still keeps me very fresh. The qualities to study the fashion design course at CSVPA, I would say, because we don't really have a house style, we're very much about, as I said, about individuality, that there's really a place for everybody within what we do. We would look at a portfolio of work at the interview stage. That doesn't necessarily have to be a very fashion-focused portfolio of work. Some of our students may have studied other courses in fashion before or sort of majored in that. Some of them will not have. So we see a very broad selection of work when we're kind of interviewing and recruiting for the course. But I would say the qualities that we look for are really a passion for the subject, a love of creativity. We like to have students that are really keen to be part of a community, that are excited to come to the UK and study with us. We want to have students that are very kind of receptive as well. So students that are excited to talk about their work, that may like to be part of a team, kind of that really embrace the kind of the sort of feeling of being in a studio and working as part of that kind of creative collective that we try and kind of create at CSVPA. CSVPA provides opportunities to take part in a lot of social projects. So I started an initiative that's mentioned here called the Emergency Designer Network during the pandemic, which was really using the power of the UK fashion community to create PPE during the COVID outbreak. So we ended up bringing together over 200 designers and brands to really pull together, I suppose, the fashion network in the United Kingdom to kind of work collectively as a power for positive change. And I won a British Fashion Award for that work in the community sector in 2020. And it's something that I'm very keen for my students to kind of be involved with. We do a lot of work in the local community in Cambridge. So that's working with local charities. It might be to create product for them. We quite often do projects in collaboration with brands using their dead stock or their fabrications to help create items that might be in need for some of these charities, etc. And we also look at ways to take part with humanitarian aid. We look at social projects, encouraging sustainability locally as well. And I mentioned earlier that the organisation Disruption, which is a local Cambridge-based creative network, they're very big on kind of working and utilising between Cambridge and London a sort of collective creative force for good. So I'm constantly looking and encouraging my students to take part in anything extracurricular and offering them any opportunities that kind of come across mine and the other staff's paths to kind of really try and foster that within the student body. Sometimes when you're doing my artworks and designs, I run out of ideas and find it hard to complete it. How do you face these problems? I guess that comes back a little bit to the sort of creative block that I mentioned earlier. Students sometimes do, and creatives just do hit a bit of a wall with what they're doing. Sometimes it's difficult to kind of see ways to navigate that and kind of ways to move forward. I like to talk about it, and I will kind of consult my peers or my friends and try and have creative discussions that will help me kind of progress from a point. I think sometimes you literally just have to work through a moment in terms of, you may think I've got nothing else to add to this, how can I push it forward? But that might be about innovating. It might just be looking at ways around the obstacle if you're kind of stuck on a particular aspect. But I find that really, for me, creative discussion and trying to remove pressure from myself or from students to just allow them to be kind of playful, to allow them to be experimental, quite often helps them form the best ways around creative block. So I think if you do get stuck, like I said, the best thing is to really have open discussions with your tutors or your peers. And I really encourage my students to talk to each other about that as well, or to students on different areas of the course, because I think everybody has a creatively different take on work when they're shown it. And sometimes that can be the key to kind of unlocking a bit of creative block. CSVPA really encourages those different cultures to mix, and we do that a lot through the projects that we offer. So like I mentioned, we have this creative network we're a part of. We're always looking at external events. CSVPA organises a lot of internal events for the students, and a lot of the students will be staying in our accommodation, so they're kind of naturally mixing and socialising together. We organise a lot of events and trips to London, so allowing our students access to galleries, to studios, to give them kind of different insights into how the creative industries are working in the UK. But we actually push our students to take a lot of initiative as well for organising things. So as much as we can organise events, I'm sure events that students will organise for themselves may be more attractive than ones that I might organise for them. So it's also about kind of empowering our students, encouraging them to take the initiative and to kind of take the leadership to kind of help form these communities and these creative networks within the student body. But we're constantly looking at ways to allow cross-pollination to occur. If a client was dissatisfied with my work, well, I've been working as a designer for a long time now, for many years, and not everybody does like your work. And I think probably one of the most important lessons I learned when I was studying my master's at the Royal College was that you have to learn to take critique. Not everybody is going to like what you do, and everyone has a very different perspective on design. Creativity is a very objective field. So I think being able to take opinion and to then edit and take the aspects from that will benefit you and help you is a real skill that takes a while to acquire, but it's something that I kind of gradually learned over time, particularly when I had my own brand. So if a client doesn't like what we produced, then it would be a matter of trying to drill into why they didn't like it and trying to then adapt and work together to come to a suitable outcome. For me, any project is really about collaboration. It's never just me producing work in isolation for a client. It's about me really understanding a client. And same with any project that you approach as a student. It's about kind of understanding the brief, understanding the concept, and underpinning that with a really kind of solid awareness of what the brief or the client is expecting to see. And a lot of the time it's just about kind of, again, having conversation. It's about constant dialogue. Creative conversations do take a long time to evolve, and it can be just having that cross-pollination with a team that can really help you understand what they want to achieve with any project that you're working on together. I'm very motivated as a designer, both just really naturally. I'm never finished being creative. I always want to draw. I'm always wanting to kind of, drawing is my guilty pleasure. That's the part of the process I absolutely love, would spend the longest doing if I had all the free time in the world. That's what I always naturally gravitate back to. And I think as a designer or as a creative, I'm constantly having new ideas. I'm inspired by my kind of day-to-day environment. I'm inspired by my students. Quite often when we're discussing their work, things that I might be interested in will kind of come to the surface. I have constant points of reference that I will always go back to. So for example, I love pop art. I love Art Deco for the kind of, as a movement, for the sort of luxury materials and the graphic lines within it. But I'm equally excited by contemporary artists, by exhibitions that I might see in London. I'm living in London I live in an area called Hackney, where there's a lot of, in East London, where there's a lot of creatives, a lot of designers live around here, and my studio is also here. And there's a real creative energy in the area. It's also a very diverse area to live. So again, very multicultural. There's a lot of different ways of dressing and of representing yourself on the street every day. And I think that adds colour and excitement to everyday life that I never get tired of. I'm constantly kind of engaged and inspired by what I see just in my day-to-day surroundings. Experimental fashion, I love. I think people should push the boundaries. And again, that's what I would encourage our students to do, to push as far as they can first. So I'm always the one that's saying, do it, make it bigger, make it more, push it to the absolute maximum. We can always make it less and edit it, but I really like our students to kind of take things as far or as big as they want to be to sort of start off with. I think experimental fashion should be challenging. I think people should be pushed by design and by fashion design, by garments. I think things don't have to be accessible. You know, there's different ways of viewing fashion and many different kind of perspectives on how it can evolve and how it should evolve. And I think that's what makes it a very exciting time to move into it as a degree. It's a very kind of changing landscape at the moment, particularly following the pandemic. There's a lot of different ways of representing what you do digitally. There's a lot of different ways of representing what you do in an experiential way, both digitally and in person as well. And I think it's the pandemic really sort of changed the perspective on how fashion is shown. So I think it's a really exciting moment for new designers and graduates to have a platform to sort of showcase themselves on. CSVPA's Fashion BA is competitive. Like I said, it's quite a small course, so we kind of maintain to have sort of 15 to 20 students maximum. And we look for kind of a really diverse mixture of students within that. So again, kind of different nationalities, different experiences. It's a really stimulating environment to work within. That said, we're kind of always open to discussion. If anyone needs any further information about anything following my talk, we're always very happy to kind of do online tours and maybe have some access to some of our alumni to give them a bit more of a kind of first-hand opinion of what it is like to study at CSVPA. But I love fashion. I really believe in the creative industries within the UK and what they have to offer. From my experience as a designer, I used to live and work in Paris. It's a very traditional environment. New York, I've also lived and worked, is much more business focused. London is where I really found the creative kind of energy and the creative hub that I was looking to work from. And I think that's really represented in the education system that we have here as well. It grows the talent that goes on to be the creatives in Milan, Paris, New York. They all kind of start out in London and in the UK. And I think it's a very exciting time to be a part of that. And I constantly enjoy what I do. I enjoy having that synergy with my students and keeping what we do at CSVPA current and innovative. And like I said, it's really a privilege to be a part of our students' kind of creative journey during their time with us and allowing them to kind of hone both themselves personally, but also their kind of strong creative signatures during their time with us.
Thank you, Holly. Last questions was the last questions in the webinar today. I think all the students and parents have the good information for on the things that they have concerns. And thank you for your presentations. And Artpink, on behalf of Artpink, I'm very glad to say and want to thank you. And I'm very confident right now to share with my students that CSVPA is a good place to guide my students to get in there. And I'm very happy when we share the same philosophy and in educations, and very appreciate that the ecosystem that CSVPA has built for the student who want to pursuing the fashion careers. And cảm ơn quý phụ huynh và các học viên đã dành thời gian tham dự buổi webinar này hôm nay. Tôi tin rằng là trong buổi webinar này hôm nay thì các quý phụ huynh và học viên đã có thể là được giải đáp rất nhiều những câu hỏi thắc mắc trong cái quá trình theo đuổi và quy hoạch đam mê của mình. Và CSVPA là một trong những đối tác chiến lược mà Artpink cố gắng tìm để có thể là giúp học viên lựa chọn được là những điểm rơi tốt nhất để có thể là theo đuổi cơ hội nghề nghiệp trong thì tương lai. Và quý vị phụ huynh và học viên hãy nếu còn câu hỏi nào thì hãy để lại contact và những vấn đề mình đang quan tâm thì Artpink sẽ là cầu nối để có thể là kết nối quý phụ huynh với CSVPA. Và một lần nữa thay mặt Artpink thì tôi xin được cảm ơn quý phụ huynh đã dành thời gian buổi tối cuối tuần ngày hôm nay để có thể tham dự buổi webinar này. Chúc quý phụ huynh và các học viên sức khỏe một cuối tuần vui vẻ. Thank you, Ms. Thank you, Holly. Thank you for joining us today, and hopefully we will meet each other in some days, and some Artpink student can have a long journey in CSVPA one day. Thank you.
No, absolutely. Thank you all very much for your time. It's been a real pleasure to speak to you today. And like I said, please do let me know if you need any further information at all in the future.
Xin cảm ơn quý vị phụ huynh. Và buổi webinar số 3 của Artpink đến đây là kết thúc. Xin được cảm ơn và chúc quý vị phụ huynh một buổi cuối tuần vui vẻ. Xin cảm ơn. Goodbye.
Bye.